The wind sliced through Red Bluff like a blade meant for bone. Rowan Ashford stepped off the Greyhound into air so cold it burned her throat with each breath. December 24th, 5:30 in the evening, and the world looked like it had given up on warmth entirely. Snow fell in thin sheets, the kind that stung exposed skin and turned sidewalks into skating rinks nobody asked for. Her phone vibrated once in her coat pocket. 2% battery left. She pulled it out, watching the screen flicker as the last email loaded. Position terminated. J. Crow deceased. Do not contact this office. The words sat there like tombstones. No apology, no explanation, just the professional erasure of 3 months of planning 2,000 miles of hope, and every dollar she'd scraped together for the bus ticket west. The screen went black. Dead phone, dead job. $23 in her wallet and a duffel bag that held 4 days' worth of clothes she'd rotated for 3 weeks. Rowan stood on the platform and watched the other passengers disappear into waiting cars, into arms that knew them, into lives that had room for one more person coming home for Christmas. The station attendant pulled the metal gate down over the ticket window. The sound echoed across empty concrete. He glanced at her once, something like pity crossing his weathered face, then turned away. The lock clicked into place. She was alone. Main Street stretched ahead through the gathering dark. Lights glowed in windows dressed with pine garlands and red ribbons. Somewhere a church bell rang 6 times, each note swallowed by wind before it could travel far. The smell of wood smoke and roasting meat drifted from houses she'd never enter, mingling with the sharp bite of diesel fumes from the bus pulling away behind her. Her stomach cramped hard enough to make her stop walking. Bent slightly, breathed through her teeth. 28 hours since the gas station granola bar. 46 since an actual meal. The body kept count even when the mind tried to ignore it. A block-down warm light spilled from a squat building with fogged windows. Murphy's Diner, according to the neon sign that buzzed and flickered like it had been doing this too long. Through the glass she could make out shapes moving inside, the suggestion of normalcy, of people who belonged somewhere. Rowan walked closer, not planning to go in, just drawn to the light the way anything cold and desperate moves toward heat without permission. Through the window she saw them. A man in his early 30s, dark hair, shoulders that spoke of confidence even sitting down. He wore a black coat too fine for this town fabric that cost more than her last month's rent. Across from him sat a little girl, maybe 6, with a riot of brown curls pulled into a lopsided ponytail. The girl was coloring on a paper menu, tongue stuck out in concentration. The man watched her with an expression Rowan couldn't quite name. Something between exhaustion and devotion. The girl held up her drawing. The man leaned closer, nodded, said something that made her smile so wide her whole face transformed. For a moment they were the only people in the world. A father and daughter eating dinner on Christmas Eve. A complete universe that needed nothing else. Rowan's breath fogged the glass. She pressed closer, forgetting herself. Forgetting that she was watching someone else's life from the outside. The warmth on the other side of that window felt like something from another world entirely. The girl pointed, directly at Rowan, waved her small hand, moving back and forth with enthusiastic precision. The man turned. Their eyes met through the frosted glass. His were dark, tired, carrying weight she recognized. The kind that didn't come from working long hours. The kind that settled into your bones when someone important went missing from the world. Shame hit her like a slap. She turned fast, starting to walk away. What was she doing, standing outside a stranger's dinner like some ghost begging for scraps? She'd come to Red Bluff for a job. The job was gone. Time to figure out the next move. Time to stop standing in the cold, staring at warmth she'd never touch. Behind her, a door opened. Cold air rushed out, carrying heat and the smell of coffee and frying meat. The man's voice reached her before she'd gotten 10 feet, low, steady, not unkind. "Excuse me, Miss—" Rowan stopped, didn't turn around. Her hands balled into fists inside her torn gloves. "I wasn't begging." "I know." She turned then. He stood in the doorway, steam rising from the warm interior behind him. Snow caught in his dark hair, melting fast. He didn't look at her with pity, just with something that might have been recognition. "But you look cold, and Silas always makes too much on holidays. Kitchen's going to waste half of it." "I don't have money." "Didn't ask if you did." The words sat between them, simple, matter of fact, not charity, just a statement about excess food and cold weather and the fact that both existed at the same time. Rowan's pride fought with her hunger. Pride didn't keep you warm, didn't fill the hollow place in your stomach that had started to feel permanent, didn't stop your hands from shaking or your vision from going gray at the edges. "Come on," he said, stepping back, holding the door, not looking at her, giving her the dignity of choosing without being watched. She walked past him into heat that hit like a wall. Her fingers tingled, her jaw trembled. The inside of Murphy's diner was small and worn and more beautiful than any place she'd been in months. Red vinyl booths, cracked linoleum floor, a jukebox in the corner playing something slow and country. The air thick with grease and warmth and the promise that people existed here who didn't spend every minute calculating survival. The man nodded toward an empty booth 2 down from where the little girl sat watching with wide, curious eyes. An older man behind the counter, 60 maybe, with a graying beard and stained apron, glanced up. "Silas," the man said quietly. "She'll take the special." Silas studied her for exactly 2 seconds, then nodded once and turned back to his grill without a word. Rowan slid into the booth. The vinyl was warm from the heating vent above. She set her duffel on the seat beside her, then changed her mind and put it on the floor, trying to look like someone who did this every day, someone who belonged. The plate arrived fast, steak medium rare, still sizzling faintly, mashed potatoes with a pool of butter melting golden in the center, green beans that looked like they'd been cooked with actual care, a piece of bread so fresh it steamed when she tore it open. Rowan stared at it, afraid if she touched it the whole thing would vanish, proof she'd finally crossed the line from poor to hallucinating. She picked up her fork, cut a small piece of steak, put it in her mouth. The taste exploded across her tongue, salt and fat and the char of proper heat. She chewed slowly, swallowed, waited to see if her stomach would rebel after so many days of nothing. It held. She ate faster then, not shoveling, but steady, mechanical, the way someone eats when food stopped being pleasure a long time ago and became only fuel. Halfway through, the little girl appeared at the edge of her booth. Rowan looked up, fork frozen halfway to her mouth. The girl had a dusting of freckles across her nose, eyes that saw too much, the kind of old young face that came from losing something big early. "Hi, I'm Willa." Rowan swallowed the food in her mouth, tried to find words that wouldn't scare a 6-year-old away. "Hello. Are you eating alone?" "Yes." Willa's face scrunched up like this was a puzzle she couldn't solve. "Why, it's Christmas Eve. Nobody should eat alone on Christmas Eve." Rowan's throat tightened. "Sometimes you don't have a choice." "That's sad." Willa said it like a fact, not judgment, just observation. Then she brightened. "My mama died last year, so Daddy's alone too now. But he has me. Do you have anybody?" The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. "Not really." Willa nodded, solemn, then slid into the booth across from her without asking permission. "Then you should sit with us. I don't like seeing people sad." The man appeared behind his daughter. Willa let the lady finish her dinner in peace. "It's all right," Rowan heard herself say. "She's not bothering me." Willa beamed. "See, Daddy, she likes me." "I can see that." His eyes met Rowan's. Something passed between them. An understanding. Two people who'd both learned that 6-year-olds didn't negotiate. They conquered through sheer force of earnestness. He didn't sit, just stood there, one hand on his daughter's shoulder. "I'm Declan. Rowan. You just get into town. About an hour ago. Passing through." She almost laughed. "Something like that." Willa leaned forward, elbows on the table in a way that would have gotten Rowan scolded as a child. "Are you staying for Christmas?" "I don't know yet. You should. We're going to church tomorrow, and then Daddy makes pancakes, even though he's not very good at them, and they're always kind of burnt, but they taste okay with enough syrup." Declan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Thanks for that ringing endorsement, kiddo." Silas appeared with the check, set it on the table by Declan's elbow without comment. Declan pulled out a credit card, handed it over. Rowan caught the name embossed in silver letters before Silas walked away. Declan Crosstech Inc. The name triggered something. She'd seen it. Forbes list, maybe. Or one of those TechCrunch articles about startup unicorns that she'd read back when she had internet and time to care about things like tech billionaires revolutionizing agriculture with AI, or whatever the hell they did. She looked at him again. Really looked. Tired eyes. Expensive coat. Hands that weren't sore but weren't rough either. A man who'd made money young and didn't quite know what to do with it anymore. "You're Ethan Blake," she said, then caught herself. "Crosstech CEO. His jaw tightened, just slightly. "Out here, I'm just Willa's dad." "Why is a billionaire eating at a small-town diner on Christmas Eve?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something raw underneath the steadiness. "Same reason you're here, I'd guess. Sometimes running away looks like standing still." Willa tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, we're not running away. We live here now." "You're right, sweetheart. We do." But the way he said it suggested the jury was still out on whether that counted as living or just existing in a different location. Silas returned with the receipt. Declan signed it, added a tip that was probably more than the meal cost. Then he stood helping Willa into her pink puffy coat. "You have somewhere to stay tonight?" he asked Rowan, not quite looking at her, giving her room to lie if she wanted. "I'll figure it out. It's 15 degrees, everything's closed for Christmas Eve." "I've slept in worse." Willa's eyes went wide. "Daddy, she can't sleep outside. It's too cold. She'll freeze like that bird we found last winter." Declan closed his eyes briefly. The universal expression of a parent realizing their child had just made the situation infinitely more complicated through pure weaponized compassion. "There's a boarding house," he said finally. "Woman named Maggie Brennan runs it. Takes in women who need a place. She works for room and board, not charity. Honest work." Rowan's instinct was to refuse, to walk out into the cold and figure it out herself, because that's what she'd been doing for 6 months and it had gotten her this far. But this far was a bus station in Montana with no job and a dead phone and weather that could kill her in her sleep. "I can't pay up front. That's the deal Maggie offers. Work first, pay when you can." He already had his phone out, scrolling through contacts, pressed call, waited. When the voice on the other end answered, his whole demeanor softened. "Maggie, it's Declan Cross. Sorry to bother you on Christmas Eve." Pause. "I've got someone who needs a room." Another pause. "No, she's not in trouble. Just down on her luck." Longer pause. "Yes, she can work." He glanced at Rowan. "What's your name?" "Rowan Ashford." "Rowan Ashford," he repeated into the phone. "Great. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Thank you, Maggie." He hung up. looked at Rowan with an expression that might have been understanding or might have been something else entirely. She's expecting you. I know you don't, but it's Christmas Eve and my daughter will spend the next week asking me if you froze to death if I let you walk out of here with nowhere to go. So do me a favor and let me drive you to Maggie's so I can sleep tonight. Willa nodded vigorously. Yeah, otherwise I'll have bad dreams. Rowan looked at the empty plate in front of her. The first real meal in weeks. The warmth that was finally seeping back into her fingers. The fact that refusing help out of pride when you were one cold night away from hypothermia was just another form of suicide. All right, she said, just for tonight. The ride took 7 minutes. Declan's car was exactly what she'd expected. Tesla Model X. Black. Silent. The kind of vehicle that cost more than she'd made in 3 years. Willa chattered from the back seat about Christmas and snow and a cat she wanted. But Daddy said no, because cats made his eyes itchy. Rowan stared out the window and tried not to feel like a charity case, even though that's exactly what she was. Brennan Boarding House sat on a quiet street 2 blocks from Maine. Victorian-style 2 stories yellow siding that might have been cheerful in daylight. Red front door with a wreath of pine and ribbon. Warm light glowed from the downstairs windows. The sound of a child laughing drifted faintly through the walls. Declan put the car in park but didn't turn it off. Rowan reached for the door handle. Wait! His voice stopped her. She turned. He was looking straight ahead through the windshield, not at her. Maggie's good people, lost her husband 4 years ago. She'll work you hard, but she's fair and she doesn't ask questions. Why are you doing this? He was quiet for a moment then. Because someone did it for me once, when I needed it. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. For the meal, for this. Now he looked at her. Really looked. We all stumble at some point. Willa piped up from the back. Bye, Rowan. I hope I see you tomorrow at church. Rowan climbed out into the cold. Her duffel felt heavier than it had any right to be. She walked up the path to the red door, aware that Declan was watching until she knocked. Making sure she actually went inside. Making sure she'd be okay. The door opened before her knuckles hit wood a second time. A woman stood there, late 30s, with auburn hair pulled into a messy bun and eyes that had seen their share of desperate people on doorsteps. She wore jeans and a green sweater with a small hole near the hem. Practical, worn in, real. You must be Rowan. I'm Maggie. Come in before you freeze through. Behind her, a little girl with bright red hair and a face full of freckles peeked around the doorframe. 7, maybe. Curious eyes taking in every detail. Rowan stepped inside. The door closed behind her, shutting out the cold and Declan's idling car and the whole frozen world. The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee and old wood. A Christmas tree stood in the corner of the front room, decorated with handmade ornaments and lights that didn't quite match. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace. Everything was mismatched and lived in, and nothing like the sterile perfection of the life she'd lost 6 months ago in Philadelphia. That's Quinn, Maggie said, nodding at the red-headed girl. My daughter. Quinn, this is Rowan. She'll be staying with us for a bit. Quinn tilted her head. Are you staying for Christmas? Just tonight. That's what they all say. Quinn's voice held the wisdom of a child who'd watched this play out before. Then they stay longer. Maggie's mouth quirked. Quinn, go check on the cookies before they burn. The girl disappeared down a hallway. Maggie gestured toward a narrow staircase. I'll show you your room. We eat breakfast at 7. Work starts at 8. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, whatever needs doing. Can you handle that? Yes. Good. Maggie started up the stairs. Rowan followed her duffel, bumping against the railing. No questions asked here, but if you steal or lie, you're out. Clear, clear. And one more thing. Maggie stopped at the top of the stairs, turned to face her. Most women who end up here are running from something. That's fine. But while you're under my roof, you face forward. No living in the past, no drowning in what was. You work, you eat, you sleep, and you figure out what comes next. Understand? Rowan nodded, her throat too tight for words. The room was small, single bed with a faded quilt, dresser with a mirror that had seen better decades, window overlooking the street, but it was clean, and it was warm, and it was more than she'd had an hour ago. Bathroom's down the hall, Maggie said. Fresh towels in the closet. Dinner's in an hour if you're hungry. I just ate. Then get some rest. You look like you need it. Maggie left, pulling the door almost closed behind her. Rowan stood in the center of the room and felt something crack open in her chest. Relief, maybe, or just the absence of the constant terror that had been her companion for so long she'd stopped noticing its weight. She sat on the bed, lay back, stared at the ceiling with its water stains that looked like clouds. Downstairs, Quinn's laughter rang out, followed by Maggie's lower voice saying something about cooling racks and patience. For the first time in 6 months, Rowan felt something that wasn't fear or hunger or bone-deep exhaustion. She felt held, not by a person, by a place. By the simple fact of 4 walls and a locked door and the knowledge that tonight at least she wouldn't freeze. She closed her eyes, meant to rest for just a few minutes. Fell asleep, still wearing her coat. When she woke, daylight was creeping through the window. December 25th, Christmas morning. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back. Red Bluff, Maggie's boarding house, the meal at Murphy's diner, Declan and Willa. The smell of coffee and bacon drifted up from downstairs. Rowan sat up, her body stiff from sleeping in her clothes. She'd missed dinner, slept straight through the night for the first time in weeks. She found the bathroom, washed her face with cold water that shocked her fully awake, looked at herself in the mirror, hollow cheeks, dark circles, hair that needed washing, the face of someone who'd been running too long. Downstairs, the kitchen was chaos in the best way. Maggie stood at the stove flipping pancakes. Quinn sat at the table coloring, already dressed in a red velvet dress that looked uncomfortably fancy. 2 other women sat at the far end of the table. One older, maybe 50, with gray hair and C's. One younger, 40 maybe, with a healing bruise on her jaw she'd tried to cover with makeup. Maggie glanced up when Rowan appeared in the doorway. There's coffee in the pot, mugs in the cabinet above. You like pancakes? Yes. Good, because I made enough to feed an army. Rowan poured herself coffee. Black, too hot. She drank it anyway, letting it burn away the fog in her head. Quinn looked up from her coloring. You slept a long time. Mama said not to wake you. I was tired. Are you going to church with us? Rowan glanced at Maggie, who shrugged. Everyone goes, it's tradition, plus there's free food after, and Quinn likes the cookies. I don't have anything to wear. The older woman at the table spoke up for the first time. Her voice was soft Southern. I've got an extra sweater if you need. We're about the same size. That's Beth, Maggie said. And that's Linda. They've been here a few weeks. Rowan nodded at them. They nodded back. An understanding passed between them. Women in boarding houses didn't ask where you came from or why. You were all here, that was enough. Breakfast was loud and warm and nothing like the silent, careful meals Rowan had eaten alone in her Philadelphia apartment back when she had an apartment. Quinn talked nonstop about Santa and presents and how she'd gotten a telescope and a doctor's kit, and had Rowan seen a telescope before because they could look at stars. They were finishing the dishes when the knock came at the door. Maggie dried her hands on a towel and answered it. Came back holding an envelope with Rowan's name on it. Mail came yesterday. Forgot to mention it with everything going on. This was forwarded from the Crow Ranch address. Rowan took it. The return address made her stomach drop. Crow Ranch Holdings, LLC. She'd seen enough legal letterhead in the past 6 months to recognize a formal communication when she held one. She tore it open, read it once, then again slower. Miss Ashford, my brother Jeremiah died December 18th from injuries sustained in a riding accident. The remote accounting position you accepted has been terminated. No compensation is owed for a position never begun. Should you attempt to claim otherwise, my family's legal counsel will respond with appropriate measures. I suggest you depart Red Bluff before the new year. Vivian Crow, CEO, Crow Ranch Holdings. The words were professional, polite even, but the threat underneath was clear as broken glass. Maggie was watching her. Bad news. The job I came here for, it's gone. The man who hired me died before I arrived. Jeremiah Crow. You knew him. Everyone knew him. Good man. His sister Vivian, though, she's another story. What kind of story? Maggie poured herself more coffee, leaned against the counter. The kind where money makes people think they own the world and everyone in it. Vivian Crow inherited half this county when their daddy died, turned it into an empire. Smart as hell, cold as January. Thinks poor folks are poor because they deserve to be. Sounds delightful. She is if you've got money or power or something she wants. Everyone else is just furniture. Maggie sipped her coffee. You planning to fight her on this the job thing? With what I don't have money for a lawyer, barely have money for bus fare out of here. So you're leaving? Rowan looked down at the letter in her hands, at the careful, expensive paper, at the signature that probably cost more to produce than her entire wardrobe. I don't know, she said, and meant it. Quinn appeared in the doorway already wearing her coat. Come on, everyone, we're going to be late for church. The community chapel sat on a small hill overlooking Main Street, white-clabbered with a bell tower that had probably been ringing on Christmas morning since before anyone living could remember. By the time they arrived, the parking lot was already full. Trucks and SUVs and a few sedans that had seen better winters. Inside, the pews were packed. Rowan found herself squeezed between Beth and Quinn, who kept kicking her legs and humming along with the opening hymn. The air smelled like pine from the wreaths and candles and the particular mix of perfume and aftershave that came from 100 people crowded into a space meant for 80. 3 rows ahead, she spotted them, Declan and Willa. The little girl turned around in her seat, scanning the crowd. When she saw Rowan, her face lit up. She waved with both hands, bouncing in her seat. Declan turned to see what the excitement was about. Their eyes met across the congregation. He nodded once, a small acknowledgement, then faced forward again. The service was what Christmas services were everywhere. Readings about shepherds and mangers and angels announcing joy to a world that mostly felt like it was running on empty. Rowan let the words wash over her without sinking in. She'd stopped believing in divine intervention somewhere between the whistleblowing and the eviction. Afterward, everyone filed into the church basement for coffee and cookies and the kind of small talk that felt compulsory. Quinn dragged Rowan toward a table laden with baked goods that looked homemade and slightly lopsided in that way that meant love over skill. That's when the woman appeared. Tall, mid-30s, wearing a black wool coat that probably cost what Rowan used to make in a month. Her blonde hair was pulled into a sleek bun. Her makeup was subtle and perfect. She moved through the crowd like she owned it, and from what Maggie had said, she probably did. Vivian Crow. She made her way toward Rowan with the inevitability of weather. People parted without being asked. By the time she stopped 3 feet away, half the room was watching. You must be Miss Ashford. Rowan set down the cookie she'd been holding. How did you know? Vivian's smile was polite and empty. Small town. Word travels. I trust you received my letter. I did. Then you understand the situation. I understand you think I came here to scam your family out of money. The room got quieter. People who'd been pretending not to listen stopped pretending. I think you accepted a position from my brother without understanding his condition. Vivian said, her voice calm and cold as surgical steel. Jeremiah made many impulsive decisions in his final months. You were one of them. He emailed me a job offer, November 15th, official letterhead, salary specifications, start date, all legal and binding. Emails can be fabricated. So can reputations. The words came out before Rowan could stop them. Vivian's eyes narrowed just slightly. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension. Vivian, leave her alone. Declan stepped between them, not aggressive, just present, creating space through sheer physicality. Vivian's expression shifted, surprise, then something harder to read. Declan, I didn't expect you to involve yourself in this. I'm involved. Rowan works for Maggie now. That makes her part of this community. For now. We'll see how long she lasts. That sounds like a threat. It's an observation. Vivian turned back to Rowan. I'm sure you're very capable, Miss Ashford. But Red Bluff isn't Philadelphia. We take care of our own here. And you're not one of ours. Sister Josephine materialized like she'd been summoned by conflict. 48 years old with steel gray hair and eyes that had stared down worse than rich women with grudges. She wore her habit like armor. This is Christmas, Vivian. Whatever business you have can wait for a more appropriate time. Vivian's jaw tightened. But arguing with a nun on Christmas morning in front of 100 witnesses was bad politics, even for someone as powerful as she was. Of course, sister, you're absolutely right. She looked at Rowan one more time. I'll be in touch, Miss Ashford. Count on it. She walked away. The room exhaled. Conversations resumed at half volume, everyone carefully not staring while absolutely staring. Declan stayed where he was. You okay? I'm still standing. She's not used to people talking back. It won't make things easier. I didn't come here for easy. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. No, I don't suppose you did. Willa appeared squeezing between them. Are you coming to our house for pancakes? Please, Daddy makes them too thick and they're kind of weird, but if you put enough syrup on them, they taste almost good. Willa. It's all right, Rowan said. I should probably get back to Maggie's anyway. See? Willa looked up at her father. She said should. That means she doesn't really want to go back. She wants pancakes. Declan looked at Rowan. Something in his expression said he knew what his daughter was doing and was choosing not to stop it. You're welcome to join us. No pressure. Rowan should have said no. Should have walked back to the boarding house and figured out her next move. Should have put distance between herself and this man who was too kind and this girl who was too hopeful, and this whole situation that felt like quicksand disguised as solid ground. But she was so tired of should. All right, she said, just for a little while. Outside, the cold hit like a reset button. People scattered to their cars calling Merry Christmas to each other with the kind of forced cheer that came from tradition rather than feeling. Rowan stood on the church steps and watched them go. A man detached himself from the shadows near the side of the building. 40-ish. Expensive suit under a camel hair coat. Same bone structure as Vivian, but softer somehow. Less sharp edges, more calculated smoothness. He pulled out his phone as he walked to his car. Rowan was close enough to hear him when he spoke. She's still here, and Cross is protecting her. We need to move faster. He climbed into a black Mercedes and drove away. Rowan stood there, the cold seeping through her borrowed sweater, and understood with perfect clarity that whatever she'd walked into it was bigger than a terminated job offer. Maggie appeared at her elbow. That was Barrett Crow, Vivian's cousin. You want my advice? Always. Watch your back. The Crows don't fight fair, and they don't forgive people for having less than them. Willa was bouncing on her toes by Declan's car, waving frantically. Rowan waved back, let herself be pulled forward by a 6-year-old's enthusiasm and her own desperate need to believe that maybe, just maybe, kindness wasn't always a trap. She climbed into the Tesla, warm air, soft leather, the faint smell of coffee, and whatever expensive cologne Declan wore. Willa chattered about pancakes and syrup and whether Rowan liked chocolate chips because they had chocolate chips if she wanted them. Declan pulled out of the parking lot, driving slow on the icy roads. Rowan watched Red Bluff slide past the windows, small houses decorated with lights. Families visible through windows, unwrapping presents, drinking coffee, being together in all the ways she'd forgotten people could be. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. The pancakes, any of it. He kept his eyes on the road. I know. Then why? Because 8 months ago I was where you are. Lost, broken, running from a life that didn't fit anymore. He paused. Someone helped me. Didn't ask questions, just gave me space to figure out what came next. I'm returning the favor. Willa piped up from the back seat. Also, I really like Rowan and I want her to stay forever. Declan's mouth quirked, almost a smile. That too. They drove in silence after that, not uncomfortable. Just 3 people in a warm car on a cold morning heading toward pancakes that would probably be mediocre and coffee that would be too strong and a few hours of pretending that the world outside didn't exist. Rowan looked out the window at the snow-covered fields and thought about the letter from Vivian Crow, about Barrett's phone call, about the fact that she had $23 and no plan and people with money and power already circling like sharks who'd smelled blood. But she also thought about Maggie's warm kitchen and Quinn's curiosity and Willa's unguarded affection and Declan's quiet steadiness. About the way Sister Josephine had stepped between her and Vivian without hesitation. About Silas Murphy bringing her a plate of food without judgment. About the strange, fragile possibility that maybe running away had finally brought her somewhere worth staying. The Tesla's tires crunched over fresh snow. Willa hummed a Christmas carol off-key. Declan's hands were steady on the wheel. And Rowan Ashford, homeless and broke and more lost than she'd ever been. Felt something she hadn't felt in so long she'd forgotten what to call it. She felt hope. The boarding house settled into routine faster than Rowan expected. 6 in the morning every morning, Maggie's alarm clock rattling through thin walls like a warning bell. Rowan learned to rise before it went off, feet hitting cold hardwood hands already reaching for the clothes she'd laid out the night before. Downstairs by 6:15, coffee brewing, eggs cracking into a bowl, bread slicing even while the toaster warmed. Maggie appeared at 6:30, hair still damp from the shower, moving through the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this alone for too long. They worked in tandem without needing words. Rowan set the table for 5. Maggie flipped pancakes. Beth wandered down at 6:40, followed by Linda at 6:50, both moving like they'd learned not to make noise or take up space. Quinn burst in at 7 exactly, already dressed for school, already talking about something she'd dreamed or read or invented in the space between sleep and waking. The girl attached herself to Rowan's side with the certainty of someone who'd decided they were friends and saw no reason to reconsider. After breakfast came the real work. Laundry that never ended, sheets and towels, and the accumulated fabric of 4 women living under one roof. Rowan's hands turned red from hot water and detergent. Her shoulders ached from lifting wet bundles, but the pain felt clean, earned, nothing like the hollow exhaustion of sitting in a Philadelphia office watching her life dissolve in real time. By 2 o'clock most days, Quinn returned from school with homework and questions that spiraled in directions textbooks never anticipated. Rowan found herself teaching fractions with pie dough, explaining photosynthesis through Maggie's struggling houseplants, making grammar less abstract by having Quinn write stories about her telescope and the stars it revealed. The girl soaked up attention like someone who'd been thirsty a long time. Her father had died when she was 3. Construction accident, a beam that fell wrong. Maggie never spoke about it except in facts, stripped clean of emotion the way people talk about tragedies they've survived by refusing to look directly at them. Evenings Rowan walked. Red Bluff revealed itself slowly. 200 people in winter, maybe 400 in summer when the ranch hands came for seasonal work. 1 grocery store, 1 hardware store, 3 churches and Murphy's Diner. A post office that doubled as a gathering place for anyone with nothing better to do than sort through mail while discussing weather and gossip in equal measure. People watched her. She felt their eyes tracking her progress down Main Street, weighing and measuring and making calculations about who she was and why she'd stayed. Some nodded, some didn't. A few crossed the street rather than pass too close. Small-town suspicion felt different than city indifference, more intimate, more deliberate in its assessment. Maggie found her on the back porch the 3rd night, staring at stars so bright they looked fake. The older woman handed her a mug of tea without asking if she wanted it. "Quinn's gotten attached to you. She's a good kid. She is, stubborn as hell and too smart for her own good, but good." Maggie sipped her own tea. Her father was like that. Could fix anything mechanical but couldn't string 2 words together about feelings. Died without ever telling me he was scared of heights. Spent 4 years climbing scaffolding in terror because the money was good and he thought that's what men did. Rowan didn't know what to say to that. Maggie didn't seem to expect an answer. "You remind her of someone she never got to have. Teacher, maybe, or an older sister. She's been asking me if you're staying." "I don't know yet." "That's fair. Just don't let her think you're permanent if you're not. Kids that age don't understand the difference between hoping and knowing." The conversation ended there. Maggie went back inside. Rowan stayed until her tea went cold and her breath turned to fog and the stars burned bright enough to make her feel smooth in a way that brought relief instead of panic. December 28th arrived with snow that fell sideways. Rowan was in the kitchen kneading dough for dinner rolls, flour dusting her sleeves when Quinn shouted from the front room, "Mama, Mr. Cross is here." Rowan's hands stilled. Through the doorway she could see Declan on the porch, arms full of grocery bags. Willa bouncing beside him in a purple coat that made her look like an excited grape. Maggie opened the door. Cold air and the smell of winter rushed in. "Declan, this is a surprise. Sorry to drop by unannounced. I was at the store and they had a sale on flour and coffee. Thought you might need some." He said it casually, but his eyes found Rowan over Maggie's shoulder. "That's kind. Come in before you both freeze." They entered in a rush of cold and energy. Willa made straight for Quinn, the 2 girls immediately huddling over something on Quinn's tablet. Declan set the bags on the counter. 4 20-pound bags of flour, 6 canisters of coffee, sugar, salt, more than any casual sale would explain. Maggie raised an eyebrow but said nothing, just started unpacking while Rowan dried her hands on a towel and tried not to look like she'd been waiting 3 days to see if he'd come back. "Rowan's teaching me fractions," Quinn announced to no one in particular. "With pie." Willa's eyes went wide. "Real pie. Dough," Rowan clarified. "We're using pie dough to show how quarters and thirds work." "Can we make actual pie, though, please?" Maggie laughed. "If you girls want to help, we can make one for after dinner. But you have to measure everything yourselves." The girls shrieked and bolted for the pantry. Maggie followed, already instructing them on the difference between baking powder and baking soda in a tone that suggested this wasn't the first time. Declan and Rowan stood in the kitchen, suddenly alone. The silence stretched. He looked tired, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there Christmas morning. Or maybe they had, and she just hadn't been paying enough attention. "You're settling in." Maggie's been generous. She's good at reading people, knows who'll work and who's looking for a free ride. He paused. "You didn't strike me as the latter." "I'm not." "I know." He glanced toward the other room where girl voices rose in debate over whether apples or cherries made better pie. "Willa talks about you constantly. Quinn this, Quinn that, and Rowan taught me about photosynthesis, and Rowan knows how to make bread from scratch, and Rowan said people used to navigate by stars." "I'm not trying to." "I know that too, but she's asking if you can come over for New Year's. There's a town thing in the square. Nothing fancy. Bonfire, hot chocolate, the usual small-town attempt at celebration." His jaw worked. "You don't have to. I just wanted to extend the invitation before she hunts you down herself." Through the doorway, Willa's laugh rang out, pure and unself-conscious. The sound of a kid who hadn't learned yet that the world took more than it gave. "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." He left 10 minutes later, Willa protesting that they hadn't even gotten to taste the pie. Maggie promised to save them a piece. The girl extracted a solemn vow that included specific promises about whipped cream and delivery timeframes. Only then did she consent to leave. After they'd gone, Maggie shot Rowan a look that held too much understanding. "Don't!" "I didn't say anything. You were thinking it loud enough. That man looks at you like you're the first real thing he's seen in a year. He's just being kind. Kindness doesn't drive across town with 100 pounds of supplies because there was a sale. Kindness would have sent a text." Maggie pulled the pie from the oven, golden and perfect. "I'm not saying jump into anything, I'm saying pay attention. Men like Declan Cross don't come around often, and when they do, they're usually worth the risk." December 31st hit Red Bluff like a fever. By 8 p.m., the town square was packed with people in heavy coats, stamping feet against cold, passing thermoses of something that probably wasn't just coffee. A bonfire roared in the center, throwing sparks toward stars that looked close enough to touch. Rowan stood with Maggie and Quinn drinking hot chocolate that burned her tongue. She'd debated not coming, spent the day inventing reasons to stay home. But Quinn had begged and Maggie had given her that look, and in the end, hiding felt worse than facing whatever judgment the town planned to deliver. So far, the judgment was mixed. Silas Murphy had appeared with a thermos of cider and a gruff, "Good to see you out." That felt genuine. Sister Josephine saved them space near the fire, her smile warm despite the cold. But others watched with narrowed eyes, whispered behind raised hands. Mrs. Hadley, who ran the post office, held court near the food table, her voice carrying on the wind. "Living at Maggie's now. Working off her room, I heard, probably planning her next move. Girls like that always have an angle." Rowan pretended not to hear. Let the words slide past like they were meant for someone else. Quinn pressed closer, her small hand finding Rowan's. An anchor. A reminder that at least one person here saw her as human instead of problem. At 10 p.m., the crowd shifted. A black SUV pulled up. Vivian Crow emerged wearing a coat that probably cost more than the entire bonfire setup. She moved through the crowd like Moses parting the sea people, stepping aside without being asked. She climbed onto a makeshift platform near the bonfire. Someone handed her a microphone that squealed feedback before settling into clarity. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It's wonderful to see our community together as we close out another year." Her voice carried practiced warmth, the kind politicians used when they needed votes. "Crow Ranch has been part of Red Bluff for 4 generations. My family's commitment to this town is unwavering." Applause rippled through the crowd. Performative. Expected. That's why I'm pleased to announce a $50,000 donation toward the new school gymnasium. Our children deserve the best, and Crow Ranch is honored to provide it. The applause grew louder, genuine this time. $50,000 meant something in a town this size. Meant new basketball hoops and updated locker rooms and field trips that didn't require parents to fundraise for months. Vivian waited for the noise to fade. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted, still polite, but colder, sharper underneath. I also want to address some rumors that have been circulating. Miss Rowan Ashford has made claims about employment with my late brother Jeremiah. The crowd went silent. Every eye swiveled toward Rowan. She felt their weight like physical pressure. Her breath caught. Maggie's hand squeezed her shoulder. A warning. A lifeline. I want to be clear. There was no valid employment contract. My brother was unwell in his final weeks. He made promises he couldn't keep. Miss Ashford has no claim to Crow Ranch assets or compensation. Rowan's vision narrowed. This was a public execution dressed up as clarification. Vivian was using her money and her stage and her family name to paint Rowan as a liar and a fraud in front of everyone who mattered. She could walk away, should walk away, let Vivian have her moment and fade back into invisibility. Instead, she heard herself speak, her voice smaller than Vivian's but steady, carrying. I never claimed anything except the truth. Your brother sent me a job offer via email on November 15th. I have the documentation. Vivian's eyes found her in the crowd. Emails can be fabricated, Miss Ashford. So can reputations. The crowd murmured, some scandalized, some appreciative. Rowan's heart hammered against her ribs, but she held Vivian's gaze, refusing to look away, refusing to be erased. Before Vivian could respond, a voice cut through the tension. I've seen the email. It's legitimate. Declan stepped forward from somewhere near the back. The crowd parted for him too, but differently, with something closer to respect than fear. He walked until he stood beside Rowan, close enough that she could feel heat radiating from his coat. Vivian's expression flickered. Surprise, annoyance, something else that might have been calculation. Declan, I didn't realize you had expertise in document verification. I'm a tech CEO. I have forensics teams on staff. Timestamp, IP address, digital signature, email headers. All verifiable. All legitimate. He spoke calmly, but his words carried authority that came from money and power and knowing exactly how much weight both held. Jeremiah Crow hired Rowan Ashford on November 15th for a remote accounting position. $45,000 annual salary. The offer was legally binding. That doesn't entitle her to inheritance. No, but it entitles her to truth. The crowd shifted. Rowan felt the change like weather. Not everyone would side with her, but enough would question. Enough would wonder if Vivian Crow was protecting her family or protecting herself. A man Rowan recognized from Christmas, Barrett Crow, pushed through the crowd. Vivian's cousin. Same sharp features but softer packaging. He smiled like someone who'd practiced in mirrors. This is inappropriate. Family business shouldn't be aired publicly. Sister Josephine's voice rang out. Then perhaps it shouldn't have been brought up publicly, Barrett. Scattered laughter. The kind that released tension and shifted power. Vivian's jaw tightened, but she recovered fast. Of course. You're absolutely right, sister. This is a celebration, not a courtroom. I apologize for the disruption. She looked directly at Rowan. Enjoy your evening, Miss Ashford. I'm sure we'll speak again soon. She descended from the platform. The crowd absorbed her. Conversations resumed in waves, louder now, energized by drama they could dissect for weeks. Rowan stood frozen. Maggie squeezed her shoulder again. Quinn tugged on her hand. That was scary, but you were brave. I was terrified. Brave people are always terrified. That's what makes them brave. Declan still stood beside her, not touching, just present. When he finally spoke, his voice was low enough that only she could hear. You okay? I'm still standing. She's not used to people talking back. It won't make things easier for you. I didn't come here for easy. Something shifted in his expression. Respect. Recognition. No, I don't suppose you did. Willa appeared, pushing between them like a missile in human form. Rowan, we're going to count down to midnight. Come on. The girl grabbed Rowan's hand with one of hers, her father's with the other, dragging them both toward the bonfire where someone had started the countdown from 60. The crowd joined in, voices merging into a single chant that rose toward the black sky. Quinn found them. Maggie appeared on the other side. They stood in a loose circle, this cobbled-together group of people who shared nothing but proximity and the fact that they'd all been broken by something and were still trying anyway. 10, 9, 8. Rowan looked at the flames, at the faces around her, at Willa bouncing with excitement and Quinn grinning and Maggie watching her with something that might have been pride. 3, 2, 1. The crowd erupted, cheering, embracing, strangers wishing each other happiness in a new year that probably wouldn't deliver, but maybe, just maybe, could surprise them. Willa threw her arms around Rowan's waist. Happy New Year, make a wish. Rowan closed her eyes. What did you wish for when you'd already lost everything and somehow ended up with more than you started with? She opened her eyes. Declan was watching her across the fire's glow, their gazes held, neither looking away. I wish for a place to stay, she whispered. Willa squeezed tighter. That's easy. Stay here forever. Simple. Impossible. Exactly what a child would say. Exactly what Rowan was starting to want. January 5th arrived with cold so sharp it hurt to breathe. Rowan was hanging laundry in the basement, her hands numb despite gloves, when Maggie appeared at the top of the stairs. Declan Cross is here to see you. Rowan's stomach flipped. She set down the basket of wet sheets. Climbed stairs that suddenly felt steeper than they had any right to be. He waited in the front room, hat in hand, snow melting off his boots onto the mat Maggie kept for exactly this purpose. When Rowan appeared, something in his expression relaxed. Can we talk outside? They walked Main Street in silence for 2 blocks before he spoke. I need an accountant. You have an accounting department. In Seattle. I need someone here. For the ranch. You have a ranch? Bought it 3 months ago. 500 acres. I'm converting it to organic farming, data-driven agriculture. Tech meets tradition. He kept walking, not looking at her. Turns out running a tech company from Montana requires different infrastructure than running one from Seattle. And ranching requires completely different books than software. What happened to the previous accountant? He was 83 and kept records in composition notebooks. Literally, 10 years of transactions in handwriting that looks like chicken scratch. Declan stopped walking, turned to face her. I need someone who can digitize it, organize it, and keep me from getting audited into bankruptcy. I'm offering $60,000 a year, office on ranch property, health insurance, 401k, standard employment contract. The number hit like a fist. 60,000. More than she'd been promised at Crow Ranch. More than she'd made her last year in Philadelphia before everything collapsed. This feels like charity. It's not. I genuinely need help. The ranch operations are a disaster. Previous owner cut corners everywhere. I'm paying vendors I'm not sure I actually owe. Missing tax documents. Invoices that don't match receipts. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I'm good at tech. I'm shit at ranch accounting. And I need someone who knows forensic work, not just bookkeeping. What will people say? Vivian already thinks I don't care what Vivian thinks. But I do. I can't afford more enemies. Then don't make it about her. Make it about you. You're good at your job. I'm offering you a job. The rest is noise. A truck rumbled past, chains on tires clanking against ice. Somewhere a dog barked. Normal sounds of a normal town having a normal winter day. Nothing about this felt normal. I need to think about it. Fair enough. Offer stands through the weekend. After that, I'll have to hire someone from Billings and they'll charge twice as much and do half the work. They walked back to the boarding house in silence. At the front steps, Declan paused. For what it's worth, I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm trying to not drown in paperwork. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah. One makes you a charity case, the other makes you an employee with skills I need. You get to decide which you'd rather be. He left. Rowan stood on the porch watching his truck disappear down the street and wondered if there was actually a decision to make or if she'd already made it the moment he'd bought her dinner on Christmas Eve. She accepted the next day, standard contract. Start date January 9th. She'd continue living at Maggie's. Independence maintained, distance preserved. The careful scaffolding of someone who'd learned not to rely too heavily on anything that could collapse. The converted barn on Cross Ranch smelled like old hay and fresh paint. Declan had installed heating insulation, a desk that looked expensive, and 2 monitors that probably cost more than Rowan's entire Philadelphia apartment deposit. The composition notebooks sat in stacks against one wall. 10 years of transactions written in shaky cursive by a man who'd clearly never heard of Excel. She started with the most recent year, worked backward, found discrepancies immediately. Vendors charging double rates, invoices duplicated, a supplier who'd been billing for hay delivery every month for 3 years despite the ranch not owning horses until 6 months ago. By the end of the first week, she'd found $67,000 in unpaid or incorrectly charged invoices. Declan stood in the doorway of the barn office staring at the spreadsheet she'd compiled. Jesus, I've been hemorrhaging money for months. Years, actually. Previous owner was either incompetent or getting kickbacks. Hard to tell which. Can you fix it? I can document it. Contact vendors, dispute the charges, but some of this is old enough that legally we might not be able to recover. Do what you can. He turned to leave, then paused. Thank you. For this, for seeing what I couldn't. It's my job. Still, thank you. The days developed rhythm. Rowan arrived at 8. Declan was usually already working somewhere on the property, fixing fences or checking irrigation or doing the 1,000 small tasks that kept 500 acres functional. Around noon, Mrs. Halloran, the ranch cook, would appear with sandwiches and coffee. Rowan ate at her desk, surrounded by numbers that finally made sense again. At 3:30, Declan's truck would pull up. Willa would burst out, backpack bouncing, already talking about her day before she'd closed the car door. The girl would do homework at the corner of Rowan's desk, asking questions about multiplication and state capitals and why clouds floated. Rowan found herself explaining things she barely remembered learning, finding ways to make abstract concepts concrete, using ranch supplies as teaching tools. Fence posts became geometry. Grain weights became fractions. The girl absorbed it all like someone who'd been waiting for an adult to take her seriously. One afternoon in late January, Willa looked up from her math worksheet. Do you like my daddy? Rowan's hand stilled mid-calculation. He's a good boss. No, I mean like how Mama liked him. Willa, it's okay if you do. Mama told me before she died that Daddy would be sad for a while, but she said someone would come along and make him smile again, like he used to. The words sat in the air, heavy, impossible, a dying woman's hope delivered through her 6-year-old daughter's voice. Your mama sounds like she was very smart. She was. She was a doctor, emergency doctor. She helped people who got really hurt. That must have been scary sometimes. She said it wasn't scary. She said it was important. That's different. Rowan thought about that, about the difference between fear and purpose, about how maybe the second one made the first one bearable. That evening after Willa had left, Declan appeared in the office doorway. He'd been working outside, mud on his boots, exhaustion in every line of his body. Sarah was an ER physician, worked at County General in Seattle, 60-hour weeks minimum, sometimes more during trauma season. Rowan closed her laptop, giving him space to talk or not talk, whichever he needed. We met at a tech conference. She was there representing the hospital's emergency preparedness program. I was pitching Crosstech's disaster response AI. We both thought we were too busy for relationships, started dating anyway. Got married 6 months later because we were young and stupid and convinced we could have it all. He leaned against the doorframe, looking at something past her, past the barn, past Red Bluff entirely. We were both workaholics, competed over who could work more hours, who could answer emails faster, who could sacrifice more sleep and still function. It was toxic as hell, but we thrived on it. Until she fell asleep at the wheel driving home from an 18-hour shift and hit black ice and... His voice cracked, stopped. I was in a board meeting in Seattle, discussing Q4 projections while my wife drove herself to death because I couldn't be bothered to pick her up, because a meeting about profit margins was more important than her safety. You didn't know. That's the problem. I should have known. Should have seen how exhausted she was, should have said no to the meeting and yes to my marriage. But I didn't. And now Willa doesn't have a mother and I don't have a wife, and all the money in the world can't undo that. Rowan wanted to say something comforting, something that would make the pain smaller. But she'd learned that grief didn't shrink from platitudes. It just absorbed them and kept growing. She chose to drive, Rowan said finally. You didn't force her. I didn't have to. The life we built forced her. The expectations, the culture, the belief that working yourself into the ground was noble instead of stupid. He looked at her directly then. That's why I'm here. Why I bought this ranch. I'm trying to build something different, something that doesn't require sacrificing everything that matters. Is it working? Some days. Others I catch myself checking email at 2 a.m. and realize I haven't changed at all. Just moved the disease to a prettier location. He left after that. Rowan sat alone in the office, surrounded by ledgers and spreadsheets and the careful accumulation of someone else's financial life, and wondered if any of them ever really changed or if they just found new ways to repeat the same mistakes. February 10th arrived with warnings, the kind weathermen delivered with grim satisfaction. Blizzard incoming. 2 feet of snow, wind chills at 30 below, schools closing early, residents advised to stay home. Declan called Rowan at 11 a.m., voice tight with stress. I need a favor, a big one. What is it? Crosstech board called an emergency meeting. Stock dropped 18% overnight because a competitor announced a breakthrough. I have to take this call. It's going to be at least 2 hours. Okay. Willa gets out of school at noon. Can you pick her up? I'll be done by 2. Rowan looked out the barn window. Sky already darkening. Snow starting to fall in thick, determined flakes. Of course. Thank you. Seriously, I wouldn't ask if... I've got her, don't worry. She left at 11:30. Drove Declan's truck because her ancient Honda would have died before reaching the school. The roads were already bad, slick, visibility dropping. By the time she reached Red Bluff Elementary, the snow was falling so thick she couldn't see the hood of the truck. Willa ran out at 12:10, backpack bouncing, face bright with the kind of excitement only kids feel about weather that could kill them. She climbed into the passenger seat, chattering about how they got to leave early, and Miss Peterson said stay safe, and did Rowan see how much snow was falling. They made it 2 miles before the road became impassable. Whiteout conditions. Rowan couldn't see the center line, couldn't see the edges, just white consuming everything. She pulled over, put the truck in park, tried her phone, no signal. The storm had taken out the cell tower, temperature gauge read -12, gas tank half full, heat blasting but not infinite. They had maybe 4 hours before cold became a real problem. Willa pressed against the window. Are we stuck? For now. Is Daddy going to find us? Yes, but it might take a while. The girl was quiet for a moment, then softer, scared under the brave, I'm cold. Rowan pulled off her coat, wrapped it around Willa, added her own hat and gloves. The girl was small enough that adult winter gear swallowed her whole. She looked like a child playing dress-up, except this wasn't play. 30 minutes passed. The windows fogged. Rowan wiped them clear, trying to see anything through the white. Nothing. Just endless snow and vanishing visibility, and the growing understanding that they were in serious trouble. She remembered the property maps she'd been digitizing. Cross Ranch covered 500 acres. Somewhere northeast of their current position was an old hunting cabin. Previous owner had used it during deer season. Quarter-mile hike through forest, maybe, if she could find it, if they could survive the walk. Staying meant dying slow, walking meant dying fast if she was wrong. But at least it was action. At least it was choosing. Willa, listen to me. We're going to walk to a cabin. It's close, but you have to stay right behind me. Don't let go of my hand, understand? The girl nodded, eyes too wide, old enough to understand danger even if she couldn't name it. They left the truck running, emergency flashers on. If someone found it, they'd know to search nearby. Rowan took Willa's hand, stepped into the blizzard, immediately lost all sense of direction. The world became white noise and stinging ice, and the terrifying realization that cold didn't care about intentions. She counted steps, used trees as landmarks, prayed her memory of the maps was accurate. Willa stumbled. Rowan caught her, kept moving. The girl was getting heavier, not actually heavier, just harder to pull. A sign of hypothermia stealing strength. 200 steps, 300. Rowan's lungs burned. Her hands had gone numb. She couldn't feel her face. Willa was making small sounds, whimpering, barely keeping her feet moving. Then through the white a shape. Dark, angular, the cabin. Rowan kicked the door open. It wasn't locked. Nobody locked doors this far from civilization. Inside was freezing, but windless, dry. Old furniture, a fireplace, wood stacked against one wall like a prayer answered. She sat Willa on a ratty couch. The girl was shivering violently, lips blue. Rowan's hands shook so badly she could barely grip the matches she found on the mantel. It took 6 tries to light one. The flame caught. Kindling, newspaper, larger logs, fire growing from possibility to reality to salvation. She wrapped Willa in every blanket she could find, sat beside her, pulled the girl onto her lap, shared what little body heat remained between them. Are we going to die? Willa's voice was small, scared. No. Mama died. She was driving and it was cold and then she was gone. We're not going anywhere. Your daddy will find us. Promise. Rowan held the girl tighter. Promise. They sat like that as the fire grew, as warmth slowly returned, as the worst of the danger passed and what remained was just waiting. Rowan told stories, made them up as she went, about stars and planets and girls who were brave enough to walk through blizzards. Willa listened with her eyes closed, breathing evening out color coming back to her face. 2 hours, 3. The storm raged outside. Inside, the fire crackled and the old cabin held them like it had been waiting for exactly this purpose. Then hoofbeats. Faint at first, growing louder. The door burst open. Declan, Covered in snow, face wild with fear, he crossed the cabin in 2 strides, grabbed Willa off Rowan's lap, held his daughter so tight the girl squeaked in protest. "Are you hurt? Are you okay, Willa, baby? Talk to me." "I'm okay, Daddy. Rowan saved me. She carried me and made fire and told me stories about stars." He pressed his face into her hair, shoulders shaking. Rowan watched him break in real time. Watched fear and relief and love pour out in a way that had nothing to do with control or appearances or anything except a father confronting how close he'd come to losing everything that mattered. When he finally looked up, his eyes found Rowan. "Thank you. God, thank you. I should have turned back sooner. When I saw how bad it was, no, you did everything right. You saved her." His voice cracked. "You saved her when I couldn't, when I was in a goddamn meeting while my daughter was freezing. You couldn't have known. That's the problem. I should have known. Should have canceled the meeting. Should have picked her up myself, but I didn't. Again, just like with Sarah. I'm always somewhere else when it matters." He broke down, leaned against the cabin wall, Willa still in his arms, a man confronting the same failure twice, learning that money and power and intelligence meant nothing against weather and timing and the terrible fragility of the people you loved. Rowan stood. Her hands were numb, her face hurt. But she was alive. They were all alive. Sometimes that was enough. The hospital in Billings took them anyway, precautionary. Willa had mild hypothermia, frostbite on 3 toes that would heal but hurt like hell. Rowan had worse frostbite on her hands from giving Willa her gloves. Doctor said she'd been maybe another hour from permanent damage. They kept Willa overnight for observation. Declan refused to leave. Rowan sat in the waiting room, hands bandaged, and stared at institutional walls while nurses changed shifts and machines beeped and the world kept spinning like it hadn't almost stopped. Maggie arrived at 10 p.m., Quinn in tow. The girl ran to Rowan, hugging her carefully around the bandages. "You're a hero. Mama said you carried Willa through a blizzard." "I just walked. That's what heroes do. They just do the thing that needs doing." Maggie squeezed Rowan's shoulder, said nothing, didn't need to. They sat together in the waiting room until visiting hours ended, then drove home through roads finally cleared by plows that had arrived too late to matter. 2 days later, Declan appeared at the boarding house. He looked like he hadn't slept. Probably hadn't. He asked if they could talk. They walked to Murphy's Diner, sat in the same booth where this had started 6 weeks ago. "I'm taking a week off work, first time in 3 years. Willa needs me home and I need to remember what it feels like to be present." "That's good. Is it I keep promising to change, keep failing? At some point it stops being about circumstances and starts being about character." Rowan wrapped her hands around coffee that burned even through bandages. "You can't change everything overnight. Sometimes you just have to keep choosing differently until it sticks." He looked at her like she'd said something profound instead of obvious. "When I thought I'd lost her in that storm, my whole world stopped. But when I found you both alive, I realized something." "What?" "I'd been terrified of losing both of you." The words hung in the diner's warm air. Heavy, impossible to ignore. "Declan, I know you barely know me. I know this is complicated and you're still figuring out your life, and I'm a widowed father with more baggage than any sane person should take on. But I need you to know, you matter, not just as an employee, as a person, as someone who's become important in ways I didn't see coming." Rowan's throat tightened. "I can't be your... I'm not asking you to be anything, I'm just telling you the truth. What you do with it is your call." He left money for the coffee, walked out into cold February sun. Rowan sat alone in the booth, hands wrapped around a mug she couldn't feel, and understood that somewhere between Christmas Eve and a blizzard in the wilderness, her life had become tangled with his, in ways that didn't untangle easy. February 14th arrived with the kind of irony the universe specialized in. Rowan spent the morning at the ranch reconciling accounts. Around noon, Willa burst in with Quinn. The girls had convinced their respective parents that they needed to hang out immediately because it was Valentine's Day. And that meant friendship and possibly making cards. They set up at a corner of Rowan's desk. Construction paper, markers, glitter that would haunt this office for months. Quinn made a card for her mother. Willa made several for classmates. Then she looked up at Rowan with those two old eyes. "Do you have a Valentine?" "No, sweetie." "Why not? You're pretty and smart and brave. Valentines are for people who belong to each other. But you belong here, with us." The girl said it with the certainty of someone who'd decided facts and saw no reason to reconsider. Rowan felt her chest tighten. This child who'd lost her mother and adopted Rowan like it was the most natural thing in the world. This dangerous, wonderful attachment that would break someone's heart eventually. Probably multiple someone's. Late that night, after work, after dinner at Maggie's, after everything settled into the quiet that came before sleep, Rowan heard gravel crunching outside. She looked out the window. Declan's truck. He sat behind the wheel engine off, just sitting there like he couldn't decide whether to knock or leave. She went downstairs, opened the front door. He looked up, saw her, climbed out. "Sorry, I know it's late. He ran a hand through his hair. "Willa asked me something today." "What?" "She asked if you were going to leave, like Sarah did. Not on purpose, but leave anyway." Rowan's heart cracked. "What did you tell her?" "That I didn't know. That people don't always get to choose, but that you were here now, and that's what mattered." He stepped closer. But I'm asking you directly, are you planning to leave?" "I don't know where else I'd go." "That's not the same as wanting to stay." He was right. It wasn't. But she wasn't ready to say the other thing out loud. Wasn't ready to admit that she woke up grateful to be in Red Bluff instead of Philadelphia. That she'd stopped thinking of this as temporary and started thinking of it as home. That somewhere between frozen dinners and blizzards and little girls asking about Valentines, she'd put down roots without noticing. "I'm not leaving right now," she said finally. "That's all I can promise. Right now is enough." He left. Rowan stood on the porch watching his taillights disappear and wondered when enough would stop being enough for either of them. February 18th arrived with a knock that changed everything. Rowan answered the boarding house door to find a woman she hadn't seen in 8 months. Charlotte Fielding, former colleague, former friend, former witness to Rowan's complete professional destruction. Charlotte stood on the porch in a cashmere coat and designer boots, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread about successful corporate lawyers. Behind her, Red Bluff looked like a different planet entirely. "Hello, Rowan. What are you doing here? Can I come in? It's freezing." Rowan stepped aside. Charlotte entered, looking around the boarding house like an anthropologist discovering a previously unknown truth. Maggie appeared from the kitchen, took one look at the expensive coat and raised an eyebrow. "Friend of yours, complicated. I'll put on coffee, sounds like you'll need it." They sat at the kitchen table. Charlotte set her briefcase on the floor. Designer leather. Probably cost more than Rowan made in a month at the ranch. The SEC indicted Marshall and Stokes, all 4 partners. Rowan's coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. "What? Your whistleblower report? Turns out you were right about everything. They'd been embezzling client funds for 6 years, 14 million total. Once the SEC started digging, it all came apart." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because the grand jury trial starts March 20th, and they need your testimony." The words settled like stones. Rowan set down her coffee. "I already gave my deposition. They need you in person, for cross-examination, to corroborate the forensic evidence. The defense is claiming you fabricated documents because you were fired. Your physical testimony destroys that narrative. How long? 6 weeks, maybe 8. Charlotte, I know it's asking a lot, but this is your chance to clear your name. SEC's prepared to issue a public statement vindicating you. Major firms are already asking if you'd consider returning. I've got 3 offers right now, 180 to 250 starting salary. Rowan stared at her former friend, at the woman who'd stayed silent when Rowan needed someone to speak, who'd chosen career over conscience and was now offering redemption wrapped in dollar signs. Why are you doing this? Why now? Because I should have helped you then. I chose my partnership track over doing the right thing. I've regretted it every day. Charlotte leaned forward. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me help fix what I helped break. When would I have to leave? March 15th. Trial prep starts March 18th. You'd be in Philadelphia through April, maybe into May. 6 to 8 weeks. 2 months. The ranch work. Maggie's boarding house. Quinn's homework sessions. Willa's after-school visits. Declan. Everything she'd built in 2 months suspended for 2 more. And if I don't, federal subpoena. You don't have a choice. They'll compel testimony either way. But if you go voluntarily cooperate fully, the SEC fast-tracks your exoneration. If you fight it, you look guilty and the defense uses that against you. Rowan closed her eyes. Of course there was no real choice, just the illusion of one, before she could answer another knock at the door. Maggie answered, returned with an expression that said the universe had decided to pile on. Vivian Crow is here, says she needs to speak with you urgently. Charlotte's eyebrows rose. The Vivian Crow Ranch Holdings. You know her. Everyone in corporate law knows the Crows. Old money, ruthless. What does she want with you? Rowan stood. Her life was spiraling in directions she couldn't control. Might as well see where it landed. Vivian waited in the front room, perfectly composed, perfectly dressed, perfectly terrifying in her calm. Miss Ashford, I apologize for the intrusion. May we speak privately? They stepped onto the front porch. Cold air bit through Rowan's sweater. Vivian seemed immune to temperature, probably had ice in her veins. I came to apologize and to offer you a position. Rowan almost laughed. You spent 2 months trying to run me out of town. I was protecting my family. I made assumptions based on insufficient information. I was wrong. Vivian's jaw tightened like the words hurt. My cousin Barrett has been embezzling from Crow Ranch. I need a forensic accountant to prove it before the shareholder meeting next month. Declan Cross showed me your work on his ranch. You're exceptionally good. Why should I trust you? Because I'm offering you $120,000 a year, CFO position, equity stake, and your name on every document that goes out. Because I need someone I can't bully or buy. Someone who'll tell me the truth even when it's expensive. Vivian pulled an envelope from her coat. Contract details. Think about it. She left. Rowan stood on the porch holding an envelope that represented vindication and opportunity and everything she'd thought she wanted. Except now she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. Inside, Charlotte waited with her own offer. Philadelphia. Redemption. The life Rowan had lost handed back with interest. 2 paths, both pulling her away from Red Bluff, both demanding she choose between past and present, between who she'd been and who she was becoming. Maggie appeared at the door. You all right? I think I'm drowning in opportunities. That's still drowning. Declan's truck pulled up. He'd come straight from the ranch, mud on his boots, exhaustion in his eyes. He saw Charlotte through the window, saw the expensive clothes and expensive briefcase and the envelope in Rowan's hand. He climbed the porch steps slowly. What's going on? Philadelphia. They need me to testify. Federal subpoena. I have to go. Something crossed his face, pain, resignation, the look of someone who'd expected this and still wasn't prepared. When March 15th. For how long? 6 weeks, maybe 8. He nodded, processing. And after, I don't know. Charlotte stepped onto the porch, extended her hand to Declan. Charlotte Fielding, corporate law. You must be Declan Cross. I've read about Crosstech's Rural AI initiative. He shook her hand automatically. His eyes never left Rowan's face. She could stay in Philadelphia after the trial. Multiple firms want to hire her, top-tier positions, real career path, not... Charlotte gestured vaguely at Red Bluff, whatever this is. Declan's jaw tightened, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. You should take one of them, if it's what makes you happy. Which one? Whichever lets you sleep at night. He turned, started toward his truck, stopped, came back. For what it's worth, you've built something here. With Maggie, with Quinn, with Willa, with me. You matter to this place, to these people. But if Philadelphia is where you belong, his voice cracked, just slightly. Then go. Just know that if you leave, we'll miss you. And if you come back, we'll be here. He left for real this time. Rowan watched his taillights fade and felt her heart split into pieces that all wanted different things. Inside, Willa's voice drifted from the top of the stairs. The girl had been there the whole time, listening, learning that adults leave and promises break and homes aren't permanent. If Rowan goes away, will she come back or will she be gone like Mama? Nobody answered. Nobody knew how. Rowan accepted both offers, not because she wanted them, because refusing federal subpoenas wasn't optional, and because Vivian's investigation needed to happen before the March 25th shareholder meeting. 10 days to prove embezzlement, 6 weeks in Philadelphia after that. Reality didn't care about preferences. She started with the Crow Ranch books on February 20th. Vivian provided an office in the main ranch house, a sprawling structure that combined old money with new taste in ways that should have clashed but somehow worked. The previous CFO's files occupied 12 bankers' boxes. Digital records went back only 3 years. Everything older existed on paper. Barrett Crow had been careful. Not careful enough, but careful. The embezzlement played out in layers. Shell companies registered in Delaware. Vendor invoices that looked legitimate until you checked the business licenses and found they'd expired 5 years ago. Land lease payments to entities that owned nothing. Small amounts individually. $863,000 total over 4 years. But underneath the financial crimes, Rowan found something worse. Email correspondence between Barrett and a man named Thomas Keller. Subject lines about the Jeremiah problem and permanent solutions, and one particularly damning exchange. Dated December 17th. Keller girth checked. Should hold for morning ride. Barrett good. Make sure there's no trace. Keller never is. Jeremiah Crow had died December 18th. Riding accident. Saddle slipped. Coroner ruled it accidental. Rowan sat in Vivian's oak-paneled office staring at emails that proved murder and understood why Barrett wanted her gone. She wasn't just exposing embezzlement. She was dismantling his alibi. Vivian returned from checking cattle in the north pasture, tracking mud across expensive rugs without noticing. She read the emails, her face went pale, then red, then settled into something harder than stone. My brother. Barrett killed my brother. The emails suggested, but we need more for law enforcement. Digital forensics, phone records, financial trail to Keller. How long? 3 days if I work around the clock, 5 if I sleep. Work around the clock. I'll get you whatever you need. Rowan called Declan. She needed his forensics team. The people who'd verified Jeremiah's original job offer could trace these emails back to their source. He arrived within the hour, bringing 2 specialists from Seattle who set up equipment in Vivian's dining room and started pulling data like surgeons extracting tumors. They didn't talk about Philadelphia, about the leaving that loomed 6 days away. They worked side by side, professional and focused, both pretending that proximity didn't hurt more than distance would. On day 3, the forensics team confirmed everything. Barrett's laptop had sent the emails. His phone had called Keller 17 times in December. His bank account had paid Keller $15,000 on December 19th. One day after Jeremiah died, Vivian contacted Sheriff Reeves, a man in his 50s who'd been born in Red Bluff and intended to die there. He listened to the evidence, reviewed the documentation, and issued an arrest warrant within 4 hours. They arrested Barrett at his home on February 23rd. He went quietly, smiling like someone who'd hired better lawyers than the evidence could overcome. But his smile faltered when Vivian appeared at the station with boxes of documentation and digital forensics that laid out his crimes in spreadsheets that didn't care about family names or old money. The town exploded. Barrett Crowe arrested for embezzlement and murder. Vivian Crowe, the one who'd turned him in. Rowan Ashford, the accountant who'd found the proof. Every conversation in Murphy's diner, every gathering at the post office, every Sunday service dissected the scandal with the hunger of people who'd been starved for drama. Rowan became simultaneously villain and hero. Some praised her. Others muttered about outsiders causing trouble. Mrs. Hadley spread rumors that Rowan had fabricated evidence to get revenge on the Crowes. Sister Josephine shut that down in the middle of the post office, with words sharp enough to draw blood. That girl saved Willa Cross from freezing, found embezzlement that was bleeding this town dry, and proved that Barrett Crowe murdered his own cousin. If that's causing trouble, we need more troublemakers. The shareholder meeting happened March 1st. Vivian stood before 30 investors and detailed Barrett's crimes with the clinical precision of someone performing an autopsy. She presented Rowan's forensics, played recordings of phone calls, showed bank transfers. By the end, half the shareholders were crying. The other half were calling their own accountants. The vote was unanimous. Barrett removed from all positions. Assets frozen pending criminal trial. Vivian retained as CEO with expanded authority. And a new position created, Chief Financial Officer. Offered to Rowan with salary and equity and the kind of validation that should have felt like victory. Rowan accepted, because turning down opportunities out of fear was how you stayed broken forever. But the acceptance felt hollow, temporary. Like accepting a gift you knew you'd have to return. The news reached Philadelphia before Rowan did. Charlotte called March 3rd, voice bright with professional excitement. Morrison and Keller increased their offer to $85,000. They're impressed with the Crowe Ranch work, forensic accounting at that level, solving a murder case. It's exactly what white-collar criminal defense needs. I haven't decided yet. Rowan, this is your career, your vindication. Everything you lost handed back with interest. I know what it is. Then what's the problem? The problem was Willa crying when Rowan told her about Philadelphia. The problem was Quinn making her promise to come back. The problem was Maggie saying nothing but hugging her tight enough to crack ribs. The problem was Declan standing on the porch the night before she left, snow falling between them, trying to find words that wouldn't sound like begging. I don't want you to go. I have to. Federal subpoena. I know. But after, when the trial's done, you could come back, or you could stay in Philadelphia and rebuild what you lost. I won't blame you either way. What do you want me to do? I want you to be happy. Even if that's not here, even if that's not with us. His voice broke on the last word, just slightly, enough to hurt. But if you ask what I hope, I hope you remember that home isn't where you came from. It's where you stop running. He kissed her forehead, not her lips. A blessing, not a claim. Then he left because staying would have made it harder for both of them. Rowan flew out of Billings on March 15th. Maggie drove her to the airport, Quinn silent in the back seat, both of them pretending this was normal instead of devastating. At security, Quinn grabbed her hand. "You're coming back, right? You promised." "I promised. Grown-ups break promises sometimes. Mama promised Daddy she'd be careful driving. She broke it." Rowan knelt, meeting the girl's eyes. "I'm coming back, I swear." "How do you know?" "Because Red Bluff is my home now, and homes don't disappear when you leave, they wait." She'd stolen Declan's words, used them like armor against her own doubt. Quinn nodded, wanting to believe, choosing to believe, because 7-year-olds still thought belief could bend reality. Philadelphia hit like sensory overload. Too many people. Too much noise. Concrete and glass and the smell of subway exhaust mixed with street food. Her old neighborhood looked smaller, shabbier. The coffee shop she'd loved had closed. Her favorite bookstore was now a vape shop. Charlotte met her at the hotel, expensive and efficient, already organizing trial prep schedules and deposition times. The legal team descended like locusts. SEC attorneys who treated her like a weapon to be sharpened. Defense attorneys who looked for cracks in her armor. 6 weeks of this. Maybe 8. The trial started March 20th in federal district court. Rowan testified March 22nd. 4 hours on the stand. Defense attorneys trying to paint her as bitter, fabricating evidence, revenge motivated. The SEC attorney destroyed their narrative with forensic evidence and digital timestamps and phone records that didn't lie. Marshall and Stokes' partners sat at their table looking smaller than Rowan remembered. Men who'd ruined her career, blacklisted her from the industry, made her choose between integrity and survival, now facing federal charges that would end with prison time. She should have felt satisfaction, vindication, the sweetness of justice delivered. Instead, she felt tired, distant, like this was happening to someone else and she was just watching through glass. The jury convicted on March 28th. All 4 partners, wire fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, 30 years minimum. The courtroom erupted. Charlotte hugged her, crying with relief. The SEC issued a statement clearing Rowan of all accusations. Major firms sent flowers to her hotel. Morrison and Keller's formal offer arrived March 29th. $285,000. Partner track. Corner office. Everything she'd worked toward for 10 years. The vindication she'd bled for. The career she'd thought was dead. She read it 3 times. Each time the words felt more foreign, like they were meant for someone else, someone who still wanted this life. April arrived gray and cold. Philadelphia spring meant rain and wind and dirty slush that refused to fully melt. Rowan walked her old neighborhood, past the apartment building she'd been evicted from, past the office where she'd lost everything, past coffee shops and bookstores and restaurants where she'd eaten lunch alone while building a career that turned out to be quicksand. Charlotte found her on a bench in Rittenhouse Square watching pigeons fight over a dropped sandwich. "You're not going to take the offer, are you?" "I don't know. That's not the same as yes." "I know." Charlotte sat beside her, silent for a long moment, then quieter. "What's in Montana? A boarding house, a ranch, a 6-year-old who makes me read her stories about stars, and a man who makes me want to stop running. Do you love him?" Rowan watched the pigeons scatter and regroup, fighting over crumbs that wouldn't sustain them. "I think I've loved him since he bought me dinner on Christmas Eve. I just didn't have language for it yet." "Then why are you still here?" "Because I'm terrified. Of choosing wrong, of losing again, of building something that collapses the moment I stop holding it together. That's called life, Rowan. It collapses sometimes. You rebuild. That's the whole game. They sat in silence. Then Charlotte stood brushing invisible lint from her expensive coat. For what it's worth, I looked up Red Bluff. Middle of nowhere. Population 200. One diner. No decent shopping for 100 miles. It sounds awful. She smiled. It also sounds like exactly what you need. She left. Rowan stayed on the bench until the pigeons gave up and flew away and the rain started falling hard enough to force decisions. The final offer came April 15th. Morrison and Keller again. This time $290, plus signing bonus, plus partnership guarantee within 3 years. The kind of opportunity that came once in a career. Rowan stared at the paper, at the numbers that should have meant everything, at the signature line that would reshape her future. She thought about Willa's face when she'd said goodbye, about Quinn teaching her the constellations visible from Maggie's back porch, about Declan working beside her in the barn office, both of them comfortable in silence. That didn't need filling. About Vivian offering her a job after spending months trying to destroy her. About Sister Josephine defending her in the post office. About Silas Murphy saving her a slice of pie every Friday. About the way Red Bluff had absorbed her into its small, stubborn community, not because she belonged, but because she'd chosen to stay long enough to belong. She picked up her phone, called Vivian. "I'm accepting the CFO position. I'll be back May 5th. You're sure Charlotte mentioned Philadelphia was offering significant compensation?" "I'm sure. Red Bluff is home now. That matters more than salary." Vivian was quiet for a moment, then softer. "My brother would have liked you, Rowan. He always said the best people were the ones who chose to stay instead of choosing to leave." They hung up. Rowan looked at Morrison and Keller's offer one last time. Then she tore it in half, then in quarters, then into pieces small enough that they couldn't be reassembled. Charlotte arrived at her hotel that evening already knowing. "You turned them down?" "Yes." "Are you insane? That was $250,000. "I know what it was." "Then why?" "Because money doesn't make you whole. It just makes you wealthy and hollow. I spent 10 years chasing this. Building this career, sacrificing everything for partnership and corner offices and salaries that looked impressive on paper. And when I got there, I was miserable. So miserable I blew the whistle knowing it would destroy me. Because staying felt worse than burning it all down." Charlotte sank into the hotel chair. "So you're going back to Montana?" "Yes. To make $60,000 a year as a ranch CFO. 120 actually, plus equity, but yeah. You could have had it all here. I already have what matters there." Her flight left May 5th, early morning. Rowan packed her single suitcase, left the hotel room that had been her cage for 6 weeks and felt lighter than she had since arriving. At the airport, she bought coffee that tasted like burnt offerings, sat at the gate watching planes take off. Her phone buzzed. Text from Declan. "Willa's been marking off days on her calendar. She's at 51. Says that's too many." "I agree." Rowan smiled. Typed back. "Tell her 0 days as of tonight. I'm coming home." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Finally, we'll be at the station." The flight took 4 hours. Rowan spent them staring out the window at clouds and farmland and the massive empty spaces that made up the American West. Coming back to Philadelphia had shown her what she didn't want. Leaving it showed her what she did. Billings Airport was small and cold and perfect. Rowan walked through baggage claim expecting to take a shuttle to Red Bluff. Instead, she found them. All of them. Maggie and Quinn at the front, the girl holding a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, Rowan," with stars drawn in marker. Behind them, Silas Murphy, Sister Josephine, Beth and Linda from the boarding house, Vivian in her expensive coat looking uncomfortable and present anyway, and Declan holding Willa's hand, the girl vibrating with barely contained energy. Rowan dropped her bag. Willa broke free, running across the airport terminal, launching herself at Rowan hard enough to nearly knock her over. "You came back. You came back. I counted all the days and you came back." Rowan caught her holding tight, feeling 6 weeks of tension dissolve into this small body that smelled like strawberry shampoo and trust. "I told you I would. But Mama promised too, and she didn't come back." "I know, sweetheart, but I'm not your mama. I'm me, and I keep my promises." Declan approached slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement would spook her back onto a plane. When he finally stood close enough to touch his hand, found her face thumb brushing her cheek. "You're really here. I'm really here. Philadelphia. Doesn't matter. This does. You do. All of this." She looked around at the people who'd shown up at 6 a.m. to welcome her home. Her throat tightened. "I didn't know I was looking for family until I found it." "So you're staying?" "I'm staying. I took Vivian's offer. CFO. I start Monday." Something in his expression cracked open. Relief, joy, fear bleeding out and leaving space for hope. He kissed her then, right there in the airport with 50 people watching. Soft and certain, and nothing like the goodbye kiss on her forehead. This was a claiming, a beginning, a promise that didn't need words. Willa made gagging noises. Quinn giggled. Maggie dabbed her eyes. Even Vivian smiled, sharp and small but genuine. They drove back to Red Bluff in a convoy, Declan's truck leading. Rowan beside him, Willa in the back seat chattering about everything that had happened in 51 days. Quinn's telescope, the new horse at Vivian's ranch. How Mrs. Halloran made cookies and saved some for when Rowan came back because she knew she would come back even when everyone else was scared she wouldn't. The town appeared on the horizon, small, ordinary, home. "I want to stop somewhere first," Rowan said. Declan glanced at her. "Where?" "Murphy's Diner." He smiled, understanding immediately. "Yeah, okay." They pulled up at 6:30 p.m. The diner glowed warm against gathering dark. Through the window, Rowan could see the booth where this had started, where a desperate woman had pressed her face against glass and a stranger had offered dinner without asking why. They went inside. Silas looked up from the grill, grinned. "Well, hell. Look who's back. Your usual booth's open." They slid into booth 3. Same cracked vinyl, same scarred table, same view of Main Street where nothing much happened but somehow everything did. Silas brought menus they didn't need. Coffee in mismatched mugs. His gruff kindness that felt like benediction. "Heard you turned down some fancy job in Philadelphia. News travels fast. Small town. News travels at exactly 1 speed fast." He poured coffee. "For what it's worth, we're glad you chose here." After he left, Willa bounced in her seat. "Can we get pancakes, even though it's dinner?" Declan laughed. "It's 6:30 p.m. That's late breakfast, early dinner. Call it what you want." They ordered. Pancakes for Willa, burger for Rowan, steak for Declan. The food arrived hot and imperfect and exactly right. They ate together, 3 people who'd been separate and became family through proximity and crisis and the choice to keep showing up. Outside, snow started falling. Light, gentle. The first snow of a spring that couldn't decide whether winter was finished. Rowan watched it through the window and felt the circle close. Christmas Eve, she'd stood outside this diner hungry and desperate and alone. Now she sat inside, fed and found, and no longer looking for something better somewhere else. Declan's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. She squeezed back. You know what I realized in Philadelphia? What? Home isn't where you came from. It's where you stop running. He smiled. Somebody smart told me that once. Must have been a genius. Or just desperate enough to see clearly. They finished dinner. Left enough tip that Silas would pretend to complain. Walked out into snow that fell like blessing. Willa ran ahead trying to catch flakes on her tongue. Declan pulled Rowan close, his arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest. I love you, he said quietly, in case that wasn't clear. I love you too, has been since Christmas Eve. Just took me a while to stop being terrified of it. Still terrified, absolutely, but staying scared forever is just another kind of death. They walked to the truck through snow that was already melting. Spring in Montana. Cold giving way to warmth, endings making space for beginnings. 1 year later, Christmas Eve arrived with the same cold that had brought Rowan to Red Bluff. She stood in the bathroom of the house she and Declan had bought together, staring at a pregnancy test that showed 2 lines instead of 1. Willa knocked on the door. Rowan, are we going to Murphy's? Yeah, sweetie, just a minute. She hid the test in her pocket. Told herself she'd tell Declan later. Tonight. After dinner. After they'd completed the circle properly. Murphy's diner glowed exactly like it had the year before. They took booth 3. Silas brought menus and coffee and the comfortable acknowledgement of tradition establishing itself. Willa colored on her placemat, drew stars and houses and people holding hands. Declan checked his phone, then put it away. Being present, choosing this moment over the 100 other demands on his attention. Through the window, Rowan saw her. A girl 22 maybe, with a backpack and fear in her eyes. Standing in the cold, watching them eat. The same desperate hope Rowan remembered wearing like a second skin. I'll be right back. She went outside. The cold hit hard. The girl turned startled, ready to run. You look cold and hungry. The girl's chin lifted. I'm fine. I know, but Silas always makes too much on holidays. Kitchen's going to waste half of it. I don't have money. Didn't ask if you did. Come on. The girl followed, uncertain, suspicious, exactly like Rowan had been. Silas brought a plate without needing to be asked. The girl ate with the careful hunger of someone who'd been empty too long. Rowan returned to booth 3. Declan raised an eyebrow. You just handed someone your origin story. Seemed only fair. Someone did it for me. Willa looked up from her coloring. Is she going to stay like you did? Maybe, if she's brave enough. She looks brave. Sad and scared, but brave underneath. Later after dinner, after the drive home, through snow that fell like memory, Rowan and Declan stood in the kitchen of their house. Their house. The words still felt new. Magic. I have something to tell you. He set down the coffee he'd been making, turned to face her fully. Yeah. She pulled the test from her pocket, set it on the counter between them, watched understanding dawn across his face like sunrise. You're pregnant, about 6 weeks. He stared at the test, at her, at the test again. Then his arms were around her, holding tight enough that she could barely breathe, and she didn't care because breathing mattered less than this, than being held by someone who'd seen her at her worst and stayed anyway. I'm terrified, she whispered against his shoulder. Me too. What if I'm bad at this? You won't be. But if you are, we'll figure it out together. That's the whole point. Willa appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Why are you guys crying? Rowan wiped her face. Good crying. Happy crying. What's happy about it? Declan knelt, pulling his daughter close. You're going to be a big sister. Willa's eyes went wide. Really, like a real sister that lives here? Really? The girl screamed. Pure joy, loud enough to wake neighbors half a mile away. She launched herself at Rowan, hugging her middle, chattering about names and sharing rooms and teaching the baby about stars. Later, after Willa finally consented to sleep, Rowan stood at the window watching snow accumulate. Declan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "You know what today is, the Christmas Eve, 1 year since I got off that bus with $23 and no plan. 1 year since you stopped running. 1 year since someone showed me that home isn't a place you find. It's people who see you broken and stay anyway." They stood like that until the snow covered the ground and the world went quiet. In the distance, Red Bluff's lights glowed small and stubborn against the dark. 200 people living their small lives in ways that mattered more than money or prestige or anything Rowan had thought she wanted back in Philadelphia. The baby shifted inside her. Too small to feel yet, but there anyway. Growing, becoming. Another chapter in a story that had started with hunger and ended with being fed. Not ended. Never ended. Just arrived at a place where the running stopped and the building began. Christmas morning broke cold and bright. They woke to Willa jumping on the bed, demanding presents and pancakes and attention in the way only 7-year-olds could. Rowan made coffee. Declan burned the pancakes slightly. Willa didn't care, drowning them in syrup and eating with the enthusiasm of someone who'd learned that love tasted like shared meals. Vivian stopped by around 10 with a fruit basket that probably cost more than Rowan's first car. She'd softened over the year. Not much, but enough that her sharp edges felt protective instead of predatory. "Merry Christmas, I heard the news. Quinn told half the town already." Rowan laughed. "That girl cannot keep a secret. Small town life. Secrets last about 16 hours maximum." Vivian's expression shifted, uncertain, vulnerable in a way Rowan had never seen. "I want to apologize again for how I treated you when you first arrived. You already apologized, multiple times." "I know, but I keep remembering the things I said, the assumptions I made. You were homeless and desperate and I threatened you. Because I was scared of losing control, of someone taking advantage of my grief." She looked away. "My brother would have been ashamed of me. He would have forgiven you. And so do I, for the 16th time." Vivian smiled, actual warmth breaking through ice. "You're good for this town, Rowan. For me. For all of us." After she left, Maggie and Quinn arrived with cookies and chaos. Sister Josephine came by with a blessing and terrible fruitcake nobody would eat, but everyone would pretend to appreciate. Silas dropped off pies. The boarding house women stopped in with handmade ornaments. By noon, the house was full of people who'd started as strangers and become family through the simple act of showing up repeatedly until showing up became habit, became bond, became home. Rowan stood in the kitchen watching them all and felt her chest expand with something too big for language. This was what she'd been running toward without knowing. Not success or vindication or career redemption. Just this. People who knew her worst and chose her anyway. Declan found her there, tears streaming down her face. "Are you okay?" "I'm so happy I don't have words for it. It's terrifying." "That's how you know it's real." He kissed her temple. "Anything that matters enough should scare you a little." That evening, after everyone left, after Willa finally crashed from sugar and excitement, Rowan and Declan sat on the porch. Snow falling. Stars burning through gaps in clouds. The world quiet except for wind and the crackle of the fireplace inside. "You know what I was thinking about," Rowan said. "What? That girl at the diner last night. I gave Maggie her number this morning. Told Maggie to expect her. Think she'll show up? Maybe. If she's ready. If she's tired of running. And if she's not, then she'll keep running until she is. That's how it works. You can't save people who aren't ready to stop." Declan pulled her closer. "You sound wise." I sound like someone who learned the hard way. The hard way seems to be the only way that sticks. They sat in silence, watching snow fall on land they'd chosen, in a town they'd chosen, surrounded by people they'd chosen. Everything that mattered was choice, not chance, not luck. Just the daily decision to stay instead of leave, to build instead of run, to love despite terror. Inside, Willa called out from her room. Nightmare, probably. The girl still had them sometimes. Legacy of losing her mother young, of learning that people you loved could vanish. Declan stood. "I've got her." Rowan watched him go, heard him climb the stairs, heard his voice low and steady telling his daughter that dreams couldn't hurt her, that she was safe, that he was here. The same things Rowan told herself every morning, the same things she'd need to tell the baby growing inside her, the same things everyone needed to hear from someone who meant them. You're safe, you're loved, you're home. Simple words, revolutionary in their execution. The snow kept falling, the stars kept burning, Red Bluff kept existing in its small, stubborn way. And Rowan Ashford, who'd arrived with nothing and built everything, understood finally that home wasn't a place you found. It was a place you made. One choice, one day, one act of staying, over and over until staying became being, until being became belonging, until belonging became the only truth that mattered. She stood, went inside, climbed the stairs, found Declan sitting on Willa's bed, the girl curled against him, both of them reading by nightlight. They looked up when she appeared. "Room for one more?" she asked. Willa scooted over, made space. Rowan slid in beside them, her family, her choice, her home. Together they read about dragons and princes and girls who were brave enough to fight their own battles. About magic that looked like ordinary life when you stopped waiting for extraordinary to save you. About the revolutionary act of choosing to stay. Outside, the snow fell on Red Bluff, covering tracks, making the world new, offering the daily miracle of beginning again. And inside, three people who'd been broken separately became whole together. Not through magic, through choice, through staying, through the simple, terrifying act of being loved and loving back, again and again. Until it stuck.